Ethan just wanted to finish his last delivery and pick up his 6-year-old son. But when he stepped into the lush garden of billionaire Eleanor Hart's estate, he froze, then panic set in. Among the perfectly manicured hedges and marble fountains, a life-size sculpture stood elevated on a stone pedestal, bathed in afternoon sunlight. Anna, his wife, dead 3 years. The face, the posture, even the delicate curve of her smile, carved in flawless white marble. Except the name engraved on the bronze plaque beneath didn't say Anna. It was a name Ethan had never heard before. Why did Eleanor have a sculpture of his wife in her private garden? And why had his wife lived her entire life under a false name? If you're already feeling the chill Ethan felt in that garden, don't scroll past without subscribing. You'll miss what comes next, and trust me, it only gets darker. Ethan's hands trembled as he stared at the inscription. Sofia Castellano, 1985 to 2021. His wife's name was Anna Morris. She'd died of cancer in their small apartment in Newark, New Jersey, holding his hand while their son slept in the next room. He'd buried her in a modest cemetery in Massachusetts, near the coast she loved to visit during their rare weekend getaways. But this sculpture, this was her. Every detail perfect. The way her hair fell across her shoulders, the birthmark near her collarbone that only he had seen, even the slight tilt of her head when she was lost in thought. He'd come here to drop off crystal vases, nothing more. 23 deliveries down, 1 to go, then grab Michael before the aftercare late fee hit. The estate's side gate had been open, instructions clear, leave packages by the garden entrance. He'd rounded the hedgerow with boxes stacked in his arms, and there she was, frozen in marble, wearing a name he'd never heard. The boxes had slipped from his grip, shattering on the gravel. He didn't care. His breath came shallow now, uneven. The garden spun around him, perfectly trimmed hedges, imported fountains, wealth so excessive it didn't even try to hide. And in the center of it all, Anna. No, Sofia. A woman he'd loved for 8 years, married in a Brooklyn courthouse, raised a son within cramped apartments across New York and New Jersey. A woman who'd worked part-time bookkeeping jobs, who'd clipped coupons, who'd never once mentioned knowing people like this. People with money. People with marble sculptures worth more than everything he owned. Can I help you? The voice cut through his shock, sharp, controlled. Ethan spun around. A woman in her 60s stood on the garden path, silver hair pulled back tight, silk blouse pristine despite the afternoon heat. Her expression was guarded, her posture that of someone used to being obeyed. Eleanor Hart. He recognized her from the business magazines Anna used to read back when they'd lived in Queens, before they'd scraped together enough for the Newark place. Ethan's throat tightened, words felt impossible. He gestured weakly toward the sculpture, then forced himself to speak. This woman, he said, voice breaking. This is my wife. Eleanor's face went pale, just for a second, but long enough for him to see it. Genuine shock flickered across her features before the mask returned. That's impossible, she whispered. Have you ever discovered something about someone you loved that made you question everything? What would you do in Ethan's position? Let me know in the comments. Her name was Anna. Anna Morris. We were married for 8 years. Ethan's voice cracked. He couldn't stop it. She died 3 years ago, cancer. I held her hand while she took her last breath. Our son was 3 years old, asleep in the chair next to us because he refused to leave the room. He stepped closer to the sculpture, his legs barely holding him upright. So tell me why you have a statue of my dead wife in your garden, and why it says her name is Sofia. Eleanor steadied herself against a marble bench, knuckles white against the stone. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at him like he'd spoken a language she didn't understand. Then her composure cracked wider. You need to leave, she said, but her voice wavered. Now. Not until you tell me how you knew her. Ethan moved toward the sculpture again, close enough now to see the fine detail in the carved marble, the way Anna's, Sofia's, left eyebrow arched slightly higher than her right, the small dimple in her chin. This wasn't made from a photograph. This is too perfect. Too real. Someone who knew her, really knew her, created this. Security. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. 2 men in dark suits materialized from behind the hedges, but Eleanor raised one hand, stopping them mid-stride. She studied Ethan with an intensity that made his skin crawl, searching his face for something, some answer he didn't have. What did you say your wife's name was? Her tone had shifted, softer now, almost fragile. Anna Morris. The words tumbled out desperately. We lived in Newark. Before that, Queens. She worked part-time as a bookkeeper, never wanted anything more, said she was happy with simple work. She loved the ocean, used to take Michael to the shore every summer even though we could barely afford gas. She'd visit Massachusetts when she could, walk along the Cape Cod beaches for hours. His throat tightened. She dreamed of seeing California someday, the redwoods, but we never had the money. Eleanor sank onto the bench, her elegant mask crumbling completely. She looked older suddenly, smaller. How old was your son when she died? 3. He's 6 now. He barely remembers her. Tears burned Ethan's eyes. He didn't bother wiping them away. Please. I need to understand. This sculpture, someone commissioned it, didn't they? Someone paid for this. Eleanor looked up at the marble figure, and for the first time, her face softened with something unmistakable, grief, raw and unhealed. $6 million, she said quietly. I paid the artist $6 million to create it. The work took 18 months. It was completed 2 years ago. 2 years ago. 6 months after Anna died. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. His knees buckled. He grabbed the pedestal to keep from falling. Why? The word came out as a ragged whisper. Why would you do that? Eleanor's eyes glistened as she stared at the sculpture. Because she saved my life. And I never got to say goodbye. That doesn't make sense. Ethan's voice came out hollow, distant, like he was listening to someone else speak. Anna never mentioned knowing anyone like you. She never traveled in your circles. We were barely scraping by most months, living paycheck to paycheck. She clipped coupons. She bought our son's clothes at thrift stores. He shook his head violently. There's no way she knew you. She didn't know me as Eleanor Hart. The billionaire's voice was barely audible now, threaded with something that sounded like shame. When I knew her, I was Eleanor Rossi. And she was Sophia Castellano. She paused, her gaze fixed on the marble face. My brother's daughter. My niece. The garden tilted. Ethan's grip on the pedestal tightened until his knuckles went white. No, that's impossible. Eleanor stood slowly, composure returning like armor sliding back into place. I thought so too. For 15 years, I thought my niece was dead. We all did. Anna's parents died when she was young, Ethan insisted, voice rising. She grew up in foster care in Maryland. She told me that herself. Multiple times. She had stories, details, names of the families who took her in. She lied. Eleanor's words landed like a physical blow. Sophia disappeared 15 years ago. Just vanished from our estate in Connecticut. She was 20 years old, studying art history at Yale, destined to take over part of the family foundation. One morning, she was gone, no note, no explanation, nothing. We searched for years. Hired investigators. Filed missing persons reports in every state. Ethan backed away from the sculpture, away from Eleanor, away from words that couldn't possibly be true. You're wrong. You have to be wrong. Anna wouldn't. She wasn't. Did she have a small scar on her left ankle? Eleanor's voice cut through his denial. Shaped like a crescent moon. He froze. Anna had that exact scar. He'd traced it with his fingers 1,000 times, asked about it on their second date. She'd laughed, said it was from falling off a bike when she was 12, nothing dramatic. It was from a riding accident, Eleanor continued, watching his face. She was 12 years old. Her horse spooked during a lesson at our Connecticut estate, threw her against a fence post. She refused to ride again after that day. The air felt too thin. Ethan couldn't get enough oxygen into his lungs. No, there has to be another explanation. Maybe she just looked like your niece. Maybe this is all some horrible coincidence. There's no coincidence. Eleanor pulled out her phone with shaking hands, swiped through photos, then held it out to him. This is Sophia at 19. The day before she disappeared. Ethan stared at the screen. It was Anna, younger, wealthier, wearing designer clothes he'd never seen her touch, but unmistakably Anna. Same eyes. Same smile. Same woman he'd loved. Same woman who'd lied to him about everything. Why? His voice broke completely. Why would she run? Why would she change her name and hide for 15 years? Eleanor's expression darkened, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of something terrible. Because of what happened to her mother. Ethan's chest tightened. What happened to her mother? Eleanor walked to the sculpture, reached out, and touched the marble hand, a gesture so tender it looked like muscle memory. My brother's wife. Sophia watched her die. Right in front of her. In their Manhattan penthouse. She paused, pain flickering across her face. The official story was a heart attack. Sudden. Tragic. The doctors signed off on it without question. Money has a way of making inconvenient questions disappear. But Sophia knew better. She heard the argument the night before. Eleanor's voice dropped to something just above a whisper. Her father, my brother, screaming at her mother behind closed doors. Sophia was 19, home from her first year at Yale for winter break. She told me later, years before she vanished, that she'd never heard him that angry. That violent. Ethan felt sick. You're saying he killed her? I'm saying my brother was not a good man. Eleanor turned to face him, and in her eyes, Ethan saw guilt, old, festering guilt. He built an empire on connections most people don't even know exist. Politicians in New York, developers in New Jersey, contractors in Connecticut who made problems disappear. When Sophia's mother threatened to expose his business dealings, when she said she'd go to the authorities. Eleanor didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. So Sophia ran, Ethan said flatly. She vanished the night before her 21st birthday, the night she would have come into her trust fund. $30 million, just sitting there waiting for her. Eleanor's voice hardened. She walked away from everything. The money, the estate, the life she was supposed to live. She became a ghost. Ethan wanted to leave, wanted to grab Michael and drive as far away from this garden as possible. But his legs wouldn't move. Questions piled up in his mind, each one sharper than the last. You said you searched for her. For 15 years. I tried everything. Private investigators, missing persons databases, contacts in every state from here to California. Nothing. She'd erased herself completely. Eleanor stepped closer, and for the first time, desperation crept into her tone. After my brother died 5 years ago, stroke, ironic given what he did to his wife, I intensified the search. I thought maybe Sophia would feel safe enough to come home. But I found nothing. Her voice cracked. Not until 18 months after your wife died. Ethan's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I received a letter, Eleanor said slowly, from a hospice nurse in Newark. She'd been sorting through patient records and found something odd. What kind of odd? Eleanor met his eyes, and in that moment, Ethan saw the same grief he'd been carrying for 3 years reflected back at him. A woman who'd died of cancer, a patient named Anna Morris, had whispered something in her final days. Something the nurse thought I should know. Ethan's voice came out strangled. What did she say? Eleanor's hands trembled as she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. She said, Tell Eleanor I'm sorry. Tell Eleanor I made it. I was happy. The words hit Ethan like a fist to the chest. He staggered back, vision blurring. Anna said that. In the hospital. The nurse didn't know what it meant at first, just another dying patient's delirious rambling. But she included a photograph from Anna's medical file with the letter. Eleanor's hands shook as she pulled out her phone again, swiping to a different image. The moment I saw it, I knew. I'd know my niece anywhere. She held the screen out, Ethan's breath caught. Anna, gaunt from chemotherapy, skin pale, eyes hollowed by exhaustion, but unmistakably her. The photo was dated 2 weeks before she died. He remembered that day. Remembered holding the phone while a nurse took the picture for the hospital records, remembered Anna squeezing his hand weakly and whispering, I look terrible. He'd told her she was beautiful. He'd meant it. Why didn't you come to the funeral? The question came out raw, accusatory. Why didn't you contact me? Because the nurse didn't have that information, just a name, a date of death, and a hospital. Eleanor's voice softened with regret. By the time I tracked down the cemetery in Massachusetts, 3 months had passed. I stood at her grave, and I realized. She trailed off, staring at the sculpture. She'd built a whole life. A real life. She'd escaped. So you commissioned this instead. Ethan gestured at the marble figure, anger rising now, hot and sharp. A $6 million memorial to someone you hadn't seen in 15 years. To a niece who clearly didn't want to be found. I wanted to remember her as she became, not as the terrified girl who ran. Eleanor's composure fractured, tears slipped down her cheeks. I wanted to honor the woman who chose happiness over wealth, who chose love over legacy. The woman who whispered in her dying moments that she'd made it, that despite everything, she'd been happy. Ethan turned away, pressing his palms against his eyes. Anna's voice echoed in his memory, those final morphine-soaked days when she'd said things that didn't make sense. He'd thought it was just the drugs, just her mind wandering. But now, tell Eleanor I'm sorry. She'd said it twice, maybe 3 times. He'd had no idea who Eleanor was. She was protecting you, Eleanor said quietly, reading his silence. Protecting your son. If my brother's associates ever discovered she was alive, if they thought she knew anything that could expose them. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The money, Ethan said suddenly, pieces clicking into place. She refused to apply for better jobs. I thought it was because she was sick, because she wanted flexible hours to spend time with Michael. But it wasn't that, was it? Eleanor shook her head slowly. She was staying invisible. No tax records that would raise flags. No paper trail that could lead back to Sofia Castellano. A horrible thought struck him, cold and vicious. Did they have anything to do with her cancer? No. Eleanor's answer came fast, firm. I had that investigated thoroughly. Genetic predisposition. Her mother had the same markers. It was cruel luck, nothing more. Silence settled between them, heavy, but no longer hostile. Ethan sank onto the marble bench opposite Eleanor, exhaustion replacing anger. For 3 years, he'd carried Anna's memory like something sacred, untouchable. Now that memory had fractured into 1,000 pieces, and he didn't know how to put them back together. Tell me about her, Eleanor said softly. Please, tell me about the life she built. Ethan hesitated, then exhaled slowly. She loved Sundays. Every Sunday, no matter how broke we were, she'd take Michael to Prospect Park when we lived in Brooklyn, later, to Branch Brook Park in Newark. She'd pack peanut butter sandwiches, nothing fancy, and they'd feed the ducks. A faint smile tugged at his lips despite everything. Michael would chase pigeons, and Anna would laugh, this real, unguarded laugh, like she'd never been happier. Eleanor's expression softened. She leaned forward slightly, hungry for details. She sang to him every night, Ethan continued, voice thickening. Italian lullabies. I asked her once where she learned them, and she said her grandmother taught her before she died. He looked up at Eleanor. I never questioned it. I thought. Our mother, Eleanor interrupted gently. Sofia's grandmother. She was from Naples. She used to sing those same songs to Sofia when she was little. The connection settled between them like a bridge being built. Painful, but necessary. Anna made our apartment feel like home, Ethan said, the words coming easier now. We didn't have much, second-hand furniture, mismatched dishes, a kitchen so small you couldn't open the fridge and the oven at the same time. But she'd put flowers in a jar on the windowsill, cheap ones from the bodega, and she'd say. His voice cracked. She'd say, we have everything that matters. Eleanor wiped her eyes, not bothering to hide the tears anymore. She was happy, really happy. She was. Ethan nodded, certainty filling his chest. She loved our life. She loved Michael more than anything in this world. And she loved me, I know she did, even if she lied about where she came from. She didn't lie about loving you, Eleanor said firmly. That was the one true thing in a life built on hiding. She chose you, Ethan. She could have come back after my brother died, could have reclaimed everything, but she didn't. She stayed with you. The weight of that truth settled over him. Despite the betrayal, despite the secrets, Anna had chosen him every single day. She'd chosen their cramped apartments over mansions, his delivery driver salary over $30 million, a quiet life in Newark over a legacy in Connecticut. She'd chosen love. There's something else, Eleanor said, standing slowly. She walked to the sculpture's base, pressed a hidden panel. It clicked open, revealing a small compartment. The hospice nurse gave this to me. It's addressed to your son. She pulled out a sealed envelope. Michael's name was written across the front in Anna's handwriting, shaky, weakened by illness, but unmistakably hers. Ethan's hands trembled as he took it. If you could leave one letter for someone you love, what would you want them to know? Sometimes the hardest truths are the most important ones. Let me know your thoughts below. Ethan stared at the envelope, Michael's name blurring through his tears. She knew. She knew she was dying, and she wrote to him anyway. She wanted him to understand someday, Eleanor said gently. When he was old enough. When the truth wouldn't destroy him. The truth. Ethan's voice turned sharp, bitter. What truth? That his mother was a liar. That everything she told us was fake. He stood abruptly, the envelope clutched in his fist. How am I supposed to explain this to him? How do I tell my 6-year-old son that the woman he barely remembers wasn't even real? Eleanor stepped back, startled by the sudden rage in his voice. She was real to us, Ethan continued, words spilling out now, hot, uncontrolled. She was Anna Morris, the woman who worked at that bookkeeping firm on Halsey Street, who made pancakes on Saturday mornings, who held Michael when he had nightmares. That woman was real. But you, he pointed at Eleanor, accusation dripping from every syllable. You're telling me she was someone else entirely. Someone I never knew. Ethan. No. He shook his head violently. You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up with your $6 million statue and your stories about trust funds and dead brothers and expect me to just, what? Be grateful. Understand. I'm not asking you to. She lied to me. The words exploded out of him, raw and jagged. Every day for 8 years, she looked me in the eye and lied. About her family. About her past. About who she was. And you're standing here acting like that's noble, like she was some kind of hero for choosing poverty over wealth. His laugh came out broken, ugly. Maybe she just couldn't handle the guilt. Maybe running away was easier than facing what her family did. Eleanor's face went pale, then hardened. You didn't know her. Not really. Exactly. Ethan shouted. I didn't know her, because she made sure I never could. She protected you. Eleanor's voice rose to match his. She protected your son. Do you have any idea what my brother's people would have done if they'd found her? If they'd discovered she was alive and married with a child? Then maybe she shouldn't have married me at all. The words hung in the air between them, vicious and final. Maybe she should have stayed gone. Stayed dead. Instead of dragging me and Michael into her mess. Eleanor's expression crumbled. You don't mean that. But Ethan was already walking away, the envelope still clenched in his hand, rage and grief tangled so tightly he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. He'd loved a ghost, a beautiful, carefully constructed lie. And now he was supposed to what? Forgive her. Thank her for the privilege of being deceived. He reached his van, yanked the door open. Ethan, wait, Eleanor called after him. He didn't turn around. Stay away from me. Stay away from my son. The engine coughed to life on the third try. He threw the van into reverse, gravel spraying beneath the tires. In the rearview mirror, Eleanor stood alone in her perfect garden, the marble sculpture of a woman who'd never really existed towering behind her. Ethan's vision blurred as he drove, the envelope on the passenger seat like a live grenade. He didn't know if he'd ever open it. Ethan sat in the aftercare parking lot for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, the envelope burning a hole in the seat beside him. Through the window, he could see Michael inside, laughing with another kid, oblivious, safe. 6 years old and barely holding on to memories of the mother who'd sung him to sleep every night. The mother who'd lied about everything. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from the aftercare director. We close in 10 minutes. He didn't move. Couldn't move. His entire body felt locked in place, suspended between fury and something else he couldn't name. Grief, maybe. Or fear. What if Eleanor was right? What if Anna, Sophia, had been protecting them all along? He picked up the envelope, turned it over in his hands. The handwriting was shaky, weakened by illness, but still hers. Still the same careful script she'd used to write grocery lists, to sign Michael's permission slips, to leave notes on the fridge that said love you with a hand-drawn heart. She'd written this knowing she'd never see Michael grow up, knowing he'd read it someday and learn the truth. And she'd done it anyway. Ethan's anger cracked, not breaking, but shifting, making room for something more complicated. He thought about the woman he'd married. The way she'd flinch sometimes when police cars passed. The way she'd insisted on paying cash for everything, even when it was inconvenient. The way she'd never, not once, suggested visiting family during the holidays. He'd thought she was just private. Maybe a little damaged from growing up in foster care. But she'd been running. Every single day, she'd been running, and she'd chosen to run toward him instead of away. His phone buzzed again. He looked up. Michael was at the window now, waving frantically, his gap-toothed grin splitting his face. Anna's smile. Sophia's smile. Whoever she'd been, she'd given him that. Ethan exhaled slowly, then carefully placed the envelope in the glove compartment. Not yet. Michael wasn't ready for this, and maybe Ethan wasn't either. But someday. Someday he'd open it, and they'd read it together, and Michael would know the truth about the woman who'd loved him enough to disappear. He climbed out of the van, legs heavy, and walked toward the building. Michael burst through the door before he reached it, throwing himself into Ethan's arms with the full-body trust only children possess. Dad! You're late. I know, buddy. I'm sorry. Ethan held him tighter than usual, breathing in the scent of playground dirt and fruit snacks. Where were we? Ethan pulled back, looked into his son's eyes, Anna's eyes, and made a decision. How about we take a drive this weekend? Up to Massachusetts. To the ocean. Michael's face lit up. Like Mom used to like. Yeah. Ethan's voice cracked. Just like Mom used to like. That night, after Michael fell asleep clutching his worn stuffed rabbit, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. Eleanor's business card lay beside it. He'd found it tucked into the envelope when he'd moved it to the glove compartment. He stared at the number for a long time. Then he started typing. "I'm sorry for what I said. Can we talk?" Eleanor's response came within minutes. "Tomorrow. 2 p.m. My office. I'll send the address." Ethan didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Anna, searching for clues he'd missed. The way she'd tensed when he suggested applying for a manager position at her firm. The way she'd cried the first time he told her he loved her, like she couldn't believe someone would choose her. The way she'd whispered "I'm sorry" in those final hospital days, over and over, until the morphine pulled her under. She'd been apologizing for the lie, and for leaving him to face the truth alone. The next afternoon, Ethan sat across from Eleanor in an office that overlooked half of Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, the kind of wealth Anna had walked away from. Eleanor looked smaller here somehow, less intimidating than she'd been in the garden. "I shouldn't have said those things," Ethan began. "About her being a coward. About—" "You were angry," Eleanor interrupted gently. "You had every right to be." "I'm still angry." Ethan's voice was quiet but steady. "But I'm also, I don't know, trying to understand. She chose me, and I can't figure out why. I wasn't wealthy. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't give her anything she didn't already have access to." Eleanor smiled, sad, knowing. "You gave her the only thing that mattered. A life where she could be herself. Not Sophia Castellano, heiress to a fortune built on corruption. Just Anna. A woman who loved her family and fed ducks in the park and made pancakes on Saturdays." She paused. "That's not nothing, Ethan. That's everything." He nodded slowly, throat tight. "There's something else you should know." Eleanor slid a folder across the desk. "Sophia's trust fund. $30 million, plus 18 years of compound interest. It belongs to her heir. Your son." Ethan stared at the folder like it might explode. "I don't want your money." "It's not my money. It's hers. It always was." Eleanor's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to take it now. But when Michael is older, when he understands who his mother was and what she gave up, let him decide. Let him choose whether to reclaim the legacy she walked away from, or to honor her choice and build something different." Ethan thought about the envelope in his glove compartment, about the letter Anna had written knowing this day would come. She'd planned for this. Even dying, even terrified, she'd made sure Michael would have options. That he'd have the truth. "Okay," Ethan said finally. "When he's ready. When we're both ready." Eleanor nodded, relief flooding her features. "There's one more thing." She stood, walked to a cabinet, and pulled out a small wooden box. "The nurse gave this to me along with the letter. Personal effects from Anna's hospital room." She opened it. Inside, a worn wedding band, a photograph of Ethan and Michael at Coney Island, and a small leather journal. Ethan's hands shook as he picked up the journal. He opened it to the first page. Anna's handwriting greeted him, strong and clear, written before the cancer had weakened her. "If you're reading this, it means Eleanor found you. It means you know the truth. And it means I need to explain." He looked up at Eleanor, tears streaming down his face. "Take it home," she said softly. "Read it with Michael when the time is right. Let her tell you her story in her own words." 2 weeks later, Ethan and Michael stood at Anna's grave in Massachusetts, ocean wind whipping around them. Michael clutched the photograph from the wooden box, his mother, young and healthy, smiling at the camera like she had all the time in the world. "Dad!" Michael's voice was small. "Do you think Mom's happy? Wherever she is?" Ethan thought about the sculpture in Eleanor's garden. About the journal he'd read late at night, page by page, learning about the frightened girl who'd become the woman he loved. About her choice, terrifying and brave and impossibly selfless. "Yeah, buddy." He pulled his son close. "I think she's happy. Because she got to be your mom. And mine." Michael leaned into him, and they stood there together as the waves crashed below, the wind carrying the scent of salt and memory. Anna had run from wealth, from legacy, from everything the world told her mattered. And she'd run straight into love. That, Ethan finally understood, was the truth worth everything. What would you sacrifice for the people you love? Anna gave up everything for a chance at a real life. What do you think that says about what truly matters? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what this story meant to you.